Hey, I'm Daniel Schottler. I'm going to be talking about the Brewers and the rest of the NL Central going into the 2014 season. Starting with the Brewers, they finished in fourth place last year. Giovanni Gallardo should be the and Kyle Loesch, they should be the number one and number two. I think the other two spots are locks as well, with Willie Peralta pretty much cemented a spot in the rotation last year, and Marco Estrada, who played all right towards the tail end of last year. Those four will be locks. I think the fifth spot will be a big question going into spring training. The guys I think they'll factor into it: Hiram Burgos, Mike Fiers, who I really liked in 2012. Kind of liked him going into 2013. He's injury hampered. I think he could factor into it. Zach Duke, who they recently signed on a minor league deal, should factor into this. Tom Gorzelani, I think, is the odd man out, even though he probably will compete for one of the jobs. I think Johnny Hellwig is out on this as well. He didn't particularly play as well when he was with the big league club. So those two guys I think I can rule out. In terms of, and I think I would consider Tyler Thornburg for the rotation, determining how he played with the big league club when he was up. He didn't really have the best year in the minors with Nashville, being 0-5 in his starts there. Bullpen-wise, Donovan Hand should be in the talks for the bullpen. Alfredo Figueroa had a good year in spot starts as well as long relief for the Brewers. Michael Blazek, who they acquired from the St. Louis Cardinals in the John Axford trade late in the season last year, pitched all right. Rob Wooden will be in the bullpen discussion. Obviously, the only Brandon Kinsler, I think, is the eighth inning guy coming out of spring training, I think, because he pitched really well in those type of situations last year, and I think the only lock right now in terms of the bullpen going into spring training is Jim Henderson, even though I would like them to go find a guy through free agency that has closer experience, because in Brewers history, that spot has kind of hurt the Brewers. You look at 2007, 2006, it was Derek Turnbow, who had a good first half of the season, and then he just faltered, and then they ended up getting Francisco Cordero. And then you look at 2008, it was Eric Gagne, who fell apart early in that season, and then it was Salman Torres. And then you look at 2010, it was Trevor Hoffman, and then he faltered, and then it was John Axford, and then you look at last year, it was John Axford, and then he fell. Well, actually, the last 2 years, it was John Axford, who fell kind of apart after his stellar 2011 season. So what I would like to see is not to have a solid season from Jim Henderson and not have to look for a closer through other options during the middle of the season when that consistency. Another guy who will be a big arm for them this year is the one they acquired through the Nori Aoki deal. Will Smith was from what I heard is a good arm. He was with the Royals last year, and he didn't make the club out of spring training, and it was one of the better bullpens in baseball last year, and so he should be a good arm. He's a lefty. Now on to the hitters: Jonathan Lucroy and Martin Maldonado. The Brewers are fortunate to have two great hitting catchers on this club. The Brewers people have been saying that for the last year or so. Jonathan Lucroy had 20 home runs last year. Martin Maldonado, I think he had 6. I figure Martin Maldonado would be either catching for the 5 starter, or Willie Peralta, considering they have some camaraderie there. Infield, the question going into spring training is first base. Juan Francisco, he does have some pop. His defense at first base isn't great. It probably will improve this year. The other two guys I think are going to factor into the discussion are the two new signees, Lyle Overbay, who previously was with the Brewers in 2004, 2005, led the major leagues in 2004 in doubles, and Mark Reynolds, whose career high in home runs is 44 in 2009. And he's a notoriously bad strikeout hitter, but I think he will thrive in Miller Park and could possibly hit somewhere between 30 to 40 home runs with how home run friendly the ballpark is. Second base is going to be a question. Well, let's stick with first base really quick. The guys who I don't think will factor in the first base, they'll play in spring training, but I don't think they'll factor. Sean Halton, Hunter Morris, and Jason Rodgers. Hunter Morris had a not so great year in Nashville, in AAA Nashville last year. He was in the discussion last year after Corey Hart and Matt Gamble got hurt, but he didn't get the job out of spring training. The thing with first base, you don't want to have it be, you want somebody consistent, because you don't want to have it be like last year where you were playing guys who weren't really familiar with the position, and that's the thing. They played Alex Gonzalez there, they played Juan Francisco there, they played Sean Halton there, they played Yuniesky Betancourt there, and a lot of those options didn't pan out for them. So you want to find somebody really consistent who can help that team out in that position. Second base, it'll be a battle in spring training with Scooter Gennett and Ricky Weeks. Ricky Weeks is the last 2 years hasn't really started out 2012 didn't really start out 2012 and 2013 that well, but even though in 2012 he kind of picked it up. So it'd be interesting to see what will happen. Because if he doesn't get that job, I think maybe he'll be on the move. It's going to be a battle there. If Ricky Weeks can prove that he can keep it consistent, the rest for a whole season, that will be interesting to watch. Shortstop, it'll be Gene Segura. He had an all-star year last year. He had a good start in the season, and then he just kind of tailed off at the second half. So kind of keeping it consistent there. I think that's going to be kind of a word to talk about the Brewers all 2014 and see if I can keep things in the infield really consistent with who's out there. They're playing a lot of people everywhere. It wasn't just Juan Francisco and Unibi and Alex Gonzalez playing at first base. They're also playing at third because of the Ramos Ramirez injury. Ramos Ramirez, if he can stay healthy, he'll be the third baseman and should be the cleanup hitter. In the outfield, the major storyline is Ryan Braun is back after a 65-game suspension. But the big story there is he is moving to right field to accommodate more at-bats for the upcoming Chris Davis with a K, who had 11 home runs during his time with the Major League club last year. He has a really good bat. He showed it last year in spring training. So should be the starting left fielder. Might be a little bit tuned with whoever gets the fourth outfield spot, which right now would be a battle between Caleb Gindel and Logan Schaefer. So I'd say right now, going into spring training, 3 of the outfielder spots are locks. Chris Davis in left, the 2013 Gold Glove winner, and Carlos Gomez, which is a rejoice to finally say the Brewers finally ended the 31-year drought of not having that, and Ryan Braun in right field. So that's about the Brewers. In terms of the division, the top 3 are it's going to, for the Brewers to get back to the playoffs, it's going to be an uphill battle. Do I think they make the playoffs this year? I don't think so. This division is really good, and there's a lot of good teams in it. And right now, looking at the St. Louis Cardinals, obviously their ace is Adam Wainwright. Jaime Garcia is their number 2. They got some good pitchers with Joe Kelly, Lance Lynn. Michael Wacha really pitched well for them last year when he was with the big league club. You figure Jason Mott's going to be the closer. So that will be how their pitching is going to look. With their obviously they have one of the best catchers in the game in Yadier Molina. And there's some really good bats in addition to Molina: Matt Carpenter, Matt Adams, Alan Craig, Daniel Descalso. They picked up Johnny Peralta in a long-term deal in free agency this year. They still got Matt Holliday. They still got John Jay. They picked up Pierre Borges from the LA Angels. So they should be, I think, going into the season, I think St. Louis, with the pitching they have and the offense and the hitters they have, I think they probably be the outright favorites in the division. Looking at Pittsburgh, who got one of the wild card spots last year, finally ended their drought of since '92 of not being able to get an above 500 record for a season. They have some good arms. Garrett Cole, is one of their top prize prospects. Jeff Locke pitched well for them last year. Wandy Rodriguez. They got Edison Volquez, who used to be on the Reds. And then they got Francisco Liriano. And I remember going into the season last year, I thought, well, that Francisco Liriano was a good pickup for that team. I thought he had pitched well for them, and I was right. They got some good bullpen pitchers with Jason Grilli as the closer, Mark Melanson as the 8th inning guy. And then on offense, we got Russell Martin as the catcher. Third base is Pedro Alvarez, Clint Barmas, the former Kenosha Croker, or Kenosha, whatever he was. Shortstop, Jody Mercer at short. Gabby Sanchez is the first baseman. Neil Walker is the second baseman. Then the outfield, it's McCutcheon, Marte. And then it's probably going to be a battle between Josh Harrison, Travis Snyder, and Jose Tabata. So that will be another interesting about them is they have a former Brewer on their two former Brewers on their invitee list in Chris Dickerson and Travis Ishikawa. So they have some really good bats on their team as well. As we move to the Cincinnati Reds, who have some good bats as well. I think this division has some really good hitters, and that's as well as some really good pitching. In terms of some of the clubs, I wouldn't put the Brewers up there yet. Their pitching isn't as consistent as St. Louis or as Pittsburgh and Cincinnati. With Cincinnati, they have Homer Bailey, Matt Latos, let's see. Those are in their number 1, number 2. Johnny Cueto is their 3. And then bullpen-wise, Aroldis Chapman's their closer. And then it'll be interesting to see how their bullpen looks. After that, Mike Leake, Sam LeClaire is a bullpen pitcher. Sean Marshall was really good for them. Former Brewer Manny Parra is still on that team. Catcher, Devin Mazzaraco and Brian Pena. That looks like an interesting platoon. Just looking at it. On the offensive side, they got some good bats with Brandon Phillips, Joey Votto, and Jay Bruce, obviously being the 3 major ones. They still got Ryan Ludwig, can be a really good bat at times. Todd Frazier, is a young, exciting bat, as well as Zach Cozart. So that they should be, up in the conversation with the top three teams. I don't think the Brewers are there yet. They could be if they can. Obviously, as I've said throughout this thing, is they need to stay. The key for the Brewers is to stay consistent, and with first base and the whole infield in general. Now we're gonna go to the Chicago Cubs to wrap things up. I think the Cubs are kind of a few years off in terms of the division and everything else, as they're still waiting to end the 100+ year drought. Jeff Samardzija their number one. Edwin Jackson's their number two. And then you're kind of pretty much not sure after that who they got. They got Carlos Villanueva's in their pitchers. Jake Arrieta, James Russell. They picked up Jose Veras. Hector Rondon had some appearances last year, so it'll be interesting to see how their pitching looks. Wellington Castillo is their catcher, and it's interesting that they also have former Brewers catcher George Kataris on this roster. Their big bats are Darwin Barney at second base, Starlin Castro at short, Anthony Rizzo at first base, and then third base is a question to see who's going to be playing there. It's probably going to be Mike Alt, who they acquired from Texas with the Matt Garza trade. I think he probably, in my eyes, would be the front runner. Another guy, Josh Vitters. Outfield, it's Shearholtz, Sweeney, and Brett Jackson, and Ruggiano. So this would be the four, I think, coming out of spring training. So right now, I think St. Louis is the front runner in the division. I think that would be a flip-flop between Pittsburgh and Cincinnati for the second and third. I think the Brewers finished fourth, and the Chicago Cubs finished fifth. It could very well be the same thing that happened last year, where the two wild card spots, just like last year, come out of the NL Central. It could be very well like that. And so that's all I'm going to say about Brewers, the NL Central as a whole. So thanks for listening. Follow me on Twitter, dchat1992.